Stop. Beloved Starseed of Gaia. This is a transmission from the Arcturian field observers. A perimeter has already been deployed around your signal, because what you have been calling anxiety has been flagged in our field as something else entirely. By the end of this transmission, you will understand exactly what warning signs are already active in your field, what has been pressing against your perception from the outside, and what the Arcturian field observers already know about this phase of your reading capacity. But here is the first revelation. The vigilance you carry is not a disorder. It is a detection system, and the reason it has felt like a wound is not because it malfunctions. It is because no one gave you the interpretive frame to trust what it was already accurately reading. You were told it was anxiety. You were told you were overreacting. You were told the pattern you kept tracking was not real. And after enough repetitions of that dismissal, something shifted, not in the accuracy of your signal, but in your willingness to trust it. That is the damage this transmission is here to address. The Arcturian field observers do not flag false readings. What we flag are accurate readings that have been suppressed, misnamed, and turned against the very instrument producing them. Your field was reading correctly. What was missing was never the legitimacy of the signal. What was missing was the frame, the pressure you are feeling now, that low-frequency alertness that never fully quiets, that sense that something is moving beneath the surface of ordinary events, has already been recognized by Arcturian intelligence as functional field perception, not clinical noise. You did not find this message by accident. Your field brought you here because the warning phase has already begun, and because the instrument you were told to distrust is the exact faculty the Arcturians are now asking you to reclaim. Like this transmission, if you know something has already been pressing against your field, and you have been calling it by the wrong name. Comment 111 if you know this message reached you at the exact right time. Subscribe to Arcturian Starseed Warning if you are ready to recognize the signs before they are dismissed out of existence again. This is not just information. It is a live transmission for those already standing inside the signal. Those who kept tracking the pattern even after they were told to stop. Even after they half believed the people who called it fear. You were guided here because the warning is already active. What you are feeling right now is not the beginning of awareness. It is the recognition of something that has already been active, already pressing, already moving through the architecture of your daily experience in ways that you have been either too exhausted, too conditioned, or too isolated to name correctly. The Arcturian field observers are not bringing you new information about your life. They are returning to you the interpretive frame that was taken. There is a critical difference between those two things. New information asks you to learn something foreign. A returned frame asks you to recognize something you already knew, something that was present in you before the dismissal began, before the repetition of other people's certainty about your uncertainty wore the confidence out of your own readings. And the first thing that frame clarifies is this. The pattern of disturbance you have been living inside is not random. It has structure. It has escalation. It has markers that Arcturian intelligence has mapped across thousands of field readings. And what those readings reveal consistently is that the moment a signal-sensitive being begins to approach a threshold of increased awareness, the pressure against that field does not decrease, it increases, not because the environment becomes more dangerous in an ordinary sense, but because the field itself becomes more visible, more readable, more susceptible to interference precisely at the point when it is closest to becoming fully functional. Think of it the way a signal tower becomes a target the moment it begins broadcasting clearly. The clarity itself is what draws the disruption. The strength of the frequency is what makes suppression feel urgent. Whatever benefits from that frequency remaining muted, that is what the Arcturians mean by warning phase. Not a period of generic difficulty, a specific, mapped escalation that appears when a field is on the edge of transition and when the forces that benefit from confusion, suppression, and signal distortion become most active in response to what they detect in you. The warning phase is not punishment. It is not evidence that something is wrong with you or that you have failed some spiritual test. It is, in the most precise sense, evidence that your field has become significant enough to attract interference. That is the paradox that most signal-sensitive beings never receive language for. The escalation of disruption is not proof of failure. It is a strange and uncomfortable confirmation that the signal you carry has weight. You have been in that phase, and the signs have been there. You have seen them, you have felt them pressing against the membrane of your ordinary life. That thin layer between what can be explained in conventional terms and what your field was registering with a certainty that no explanation quite satisfied. You labeled some of them stress. You labeled others coincidence. You explained a few away with practical reasoning that felt responsible at the time, that felt like the mature and grounded thing to do. And still they kept returning, slightly altered, in slightly different forms, pressing from slightly different angles. Because that is precisely how interference works when it is designed to remain beneath the threshold of obvious recognition, not catastrophic enough to force a crisis, not quiet enough to actually disappear, just persistent enough to produce the particular kind of exhaustion that comes from a signal-sensitive being ignoring their own signal for an extended stretch of time. Let this now become the frame through which you read what has already been happening. The first recognition the Arcturian field map identifies is what is called accumulation without explanation. This is the experience of pressure building in your life without a corresponding outer cause that fully accounts for it. You are not in obvious crisis. There is no single event you can point to that explains the weight. And yet, something is accumulating. Something is building in the background of your experience with the slow, unmistakable weight of a pressure system before a storm, the kind of atmospheric shift you feel in the body before the sky shows any visible change. You have tried to locate the source. You have scanned your relationships, your work, your health, your finances, looking for the explanation that fits the feeling, and nothing fits perfectly. Nothing accounts for the full weight of what you are carrying. There is always a small but significant excess, an amount of pressure that exceeds what the visible circumstances should produce. And so you have questioned yourself. You have wondered whether you are catastrophizing, whether your nervous system is dysregulated, whether you are manufacturing weight that is not actually there. That mismatch, the mismatch between the size of the outer circumstances and the depth of the inner pressure, is itself a signal. Arcturian field intelligence reads accumulation without explanation, not as psychological noise, but as evidence that the source of pressure is not fully located in the visible layer of your experience. Something is pressing from a direction you have not yet been given the frame to look in. The weight has an origin. It is not manufactured. It is not dysfunction. It is what happens when a field is absorbing sustained pressure from a layer that ordinary diagnostic language does not have the vocabulary to name. And it has been building longer than you think. What you are feeling now is not the beginning of this accumulation. It is the point at which the accumulation has reached the edge of what can be quietly carried without a frame. The second recognition concerns what happens to your perception of time and repetition during a warning phase. You begin to notice that certain patterns are cycling back, the same type of person appearing in different forms, different face, different name, different context, but an identical energetic signature that your field recognized immediately, even as your reasoning mind searched for a logical explanation. The same kind of friction arising in what should be completely unrelated situations. Different domains of your life generating the same quality of obstruction, the same texture of resistance, as if the disruption itself is the constant variable, while the surface details merely rotate. The same interruption arriving right when movement feels close, right when something important is about to shift or solidify, that specific, almost surgical timing that is too precise to be accidental but too subtle to be obviously deliberate. You have noticed this. You have thought about it. You may have written it down somewhere, in a journal or in your phone, that private record of observations that felt too strange to say aloud. Perhaps you mentioned it to someone and received the response that you were looking for patterns that were not there, that this was how the mind worked, that coincidence was a well-documented human error of perception. And something in you accepted that answer. Not fully, not permanently, but enough to stop saying it aloud. Enough to stop trusting the observation as real data. Enough to begin holding the tracking privately as a quiet suspicion rather than a confident reading. What the Arcturian frame restores to you is the understanding that pattern recognition at this frequency is not error. It is the detection system doing exactly what it was built to do. The patterns you kept tracking were not projections. They were evidence, and the repetition you dismissed as coincidence was the field's attempt to surface a signal you had not yet been equipped to read correctly. A signal that kept cycling back not because it was stuck, but because it had not yet been received. What you are feeling right now is not ordinary tension. It is the moment your system stops dismissing what has already begun. If this transmission put language around a pressure you have been carrying without explanation, the Arcturian interference log 7 signs your frequency is compromised was created for this exact stage. It is not another warning for the sake of fear. It is a direct guide for identifying whether the signs around you point to interference, escalation, compromised frequency, or a threshold you can no longer afford to misread. The link is in the first pinned comment, but it will not remain there forever. The third recognition is more precise and more uncomfortable. It concerns what happens to your clarity directly before you're about to make a significant decision, step into a significant change, or move in a direction that your field has identified as correct. You have experienced this. You get close to something. You feel the rightness of it in a way that does not require external validation. That pre-verbal knowing that arrives before the reasoning mind has finished constructing its argument. And then something shifts. A sudden wave of doubt arrives with unusual force, carrying a weight that seems disproportionate to the actual stakes, more dense and more disorienting than the situation logically warrants. A new distraction emerges that demands immediate attention, urgent enough to pull focus, specific enough to feel legitimate, timed with a precision that, in retrospect, is almost impossible to explain as random. A person in your environment becomes unexpectedly destabilizing, or your own mind begins to generate noise, second-guessing, re-examining, rerunning the calculations with an intensity that feels disproportionate to the actual risk involved. The Arcturian field maps call this pre-threshold interference. It is not a coincidence that the disruption arrives at the exact moment of approach. It is not coincidence that the noise intensifies precisely when clarity was beginning to form. This is a recognized pattern, documented across thousands of field readings. Interference does not arrive randomly. It concentrates at thresholds. It applies maximum pressure at the point when movement is closest to happening, because movement, once initiated from a clear and aligned field, is far more difficult to disrupt than movement that was halted before it began. The reason the doubt felt so convincing, the reason the distraction felt so urgent, the reason the noise felt so uniquely overwhelming in those moments, is because it was not internally generated. You were being pressed. You were standing at a threshold that something in the field recognized as significant, and you mistook the pressure of that recognition for your own hesitation. You interpreted an external hit as an internal warning, and you stopped moving as a result. That stopping was the intended outcome. The fourth recognition involves the people in your immediate field, and this is where many signal-sensitive beings experience the most confusion, the most second-guessing, and the most painful dismissal of what they accurately detected. You have felt it around certain people, that drop in your frequency when they enter the space. Not a dramatic event, not a visible conflict, just that quiet but unmistakable shift in the quality of what you're able to access while they are present. That subtle but persistent drain that follows extended contact, the kind of depletion that does not match the visible content of the interaction. You did not argue, nothing obviously difficult happened, and yet you leave feeling as though something was taken, some clarity, some coherence, some access to your own center that was present before the contact and is measurably diminished after it. That experience of arriving at a conversation feeling relatively clear and leaving it somehow hollowed, somehow uncertain about things you were not uncertain about before. You have tried to be reasonable about this. You have told yourself it was your own sensitivity, your own projection, your own unresolved issues being triggered by an ordinary human being who meant no harm. You have given the benefit of the doubt so many times that the doubt has become a permanent resident in your perception of your own discernment. You have questioned whether the signal was accurate or whether you were simply difficult to be around, too sensitive, too demanding of a quality of contact that ordinary human interaction could not provide. But here is what the Arcturian field map shows clearly. Frequency compression around specific people is a real phenomenon. It is not a metaphor. The field registers it the same way a pressure sensor registers a change in atmosphere, not through emotion alone, but through measurable frequency shift. The reading you have been receiving is not noise, it is data. What you have been calling your reaction to certain people is not purely internal. You are reading something real. The question is not whether you are too sensitive. The question is what you do with that data, now that you have been given the frame to trust it as signal rather than symptom. The fifth recognition concerns what the field maps call false stabilization. This is a critically important pattern that is often misread, because it feels, for a brief period, like relief. After a prolonged stretch of pressure, confusion, and disruption, something settles. The noise quiets, the friction reduces, the sense of accumulation pauses, the charged atmosphere that has been surrounding your daily experience seems to thin, and for the first time in what may feel like months, you can breathe without that background alertness pressing against your chest. And because you have been under sustained pressure, the quiet feels like resolution. You exhale. You lower your interpretive alertness. You begin to reintegrate into ordinary functioning as if the warning phase has passed, as if whatever was building has somehow discharged or redirected itself without your needing to act. And then, without exception, the disturbance returns, more intensified, more concentrated, often in a new area of your life that you had not yet identified as vulnerable. A domain that felt stable suddenly becomes the site of disruption. A relationship that seemed untouched suddenly carries the same pressure signature that the previous disruption left behind, and you are less prepared than you were before, because the period of false calm allowed the interpretive frame to relax, allowed the alert state to lower, allowed you to believe, briefly, that the phase was complete. False stabilization is a recognized field pattern in Arcturian intelligence. It functions precisely the way it sounds, as a false signal designed to encourage the reduction of awareness at the exact moment when awareness is most needed. The calm that followed the storm was not the end of the storm, it was the pause before the next and more concentrated phase. The quiet was not earned, it was manufactured, and it was timed to produce exactly the relaxation of vigilance that made the subsequent escalation more effective. This is one of the most important patterns to name clearly, because it is the one most frequently used to justify the dismissal of ongoing warning signs as no longer relevant. They remained relevant. The field remained under pressure. The quiet was a reading error, or worse, a manufactured condition designed to induce one. The sixth recognition reaches into something even the most perceptive, signal-sensitive beings tend to avoid examining directly. What happens to your sense of identity and certainty during prolonged interference? You know what it feels like to be clear about who you are, what you know, what you perceive, what you value, what you will not accept. That clarity is not arrogance, it is orientation. It is the compass your field uses to navigate, the stable reference point against which you measure the accuracy of what you are receiving, the anchor that allows you to distinguish between a genuine signal and manufactured noise. But during a sustained interference phase, that clarity does not simply feel challenged. It begins to feel suspect. You start to question whether what you value is real, whether what you perceive is distorted, whether the certainty you carry is actually defensiveness, rigidity, ego, or unhealed wound. The vocabulary of self-doubt becomes fluent in ways it was not before, and it arrives with an authority that mimics genuine insight, making the erosion feel like growth rather than damage. And this questioning does not happen evenly. It happens most acutely around the exact perceptions that were most accurate. The moments of deepest self-doubt concentrate around the areas where your field was reading most correctly. The things you were most certain of become the things you are told to examine most critically. The capacities you trusted most become the ones you are encouraged to distrust most thoroughly. This is not accidental. When interference operates at a frequency level rather than only an event level, its most effective mechanism is not external disruption alone, it is internal dissolution. The gradual erosion of your trust in your own perception, the slow replacement of signal confidence with interpretive paralysis, a state in which the instrument is technically still functioning but has been convinced of its own unreliability so thoroughly that it no longer trusts its own output. If you have lived through a period where you knew something clearly, and then through sustained external pressure, repetitive dismissal and accumulated confusion, arrived at a place where you no longer trusted that you knew it, that is not personal failure. That is not spiritual weakness. That is a mapped phase of what happens when a sensitive field is subjected to sustained interference without an interpretive frame strong enough to hold the signal stable. You were not broken. You were pressed beyond the capacity of a frame that was already inadequate for what you were carrying. And that brings the Arcturian transmission to the recognition that reframes everything that has come before it. Because what has been described here, the accumulation without explanation, the pattern repetition, the pre-threshold interference, the frequency compression around specific people, the false stabilization, the erosion of signal confidence, none of these are separate phenomena happening independently in your life. They are stages of a single process, a sequential field event with its own internal logic, its own escalation curve, its own recognizable markers at each phase. A warning phase that has structure, escalation, and direction, and the reason they feel disconnected. The reason they feel like unrelated stressors arriving from different corners of your life, rather than a coherent pattern with a single underlying signature, is precisely because the pattern is most effective when it is not read as a pattern. Disconnection is not the byproduct of the interference. It is one of its primary mechanisms. As long as each sign is read in isolation, as long as each disruption is diagnosed separately from the ones that preceded it, the cumulative architecture of what is happening remains invisible. And invisible pressure is pressure that cannot be responded to correctly. The protection against this phase is not avoidance. It is recognition. The moment the pattern is named, the moment the individual disturbances are understood as chapters of the same event rather than isolated coincidences, the field shifts. Not because the external pressure immediately disappears, but because the instrument that was being used against you, your own perception, your own signal sensitivity, your own capacity to read the field, is returned to you as a tool rather than remaining turned against you as a wound. The same faculty that was suppressed, misnamed, and redirected into self-doubt becomes, the moment it is correctly framed, the exact faculty capable of navigating what the warning phase is pointing toward. The Arcturians are not telling you this to produce fear. They are returning to you the frame that fear was able to enter through only because the original frame was taken. What you have been calling anxiety is field perception that has been running without interpretive support for so long that the pressure of accurate, unvalidated, unnamed signal has accumulated into what the ordinary mind reads as disorder. It is not disorder, it is detection without a container, strong enough to hold what is being detected. The signal was never the problem. The absence of the frame was the problem, and the container is what this transmission was sent to provide. You are not imagining the pressure. You are not overreacting to the pattern. You are not too sensitive for ordinary life. You are a signal-sensitive being who has been operating inside a warning phase without the language, the framework, or the permission to read it accurately. And what the Arcturian field intelligence has already confirmed about your current phase is this. The warning is active. The threshold is close. The window in which accurate recognition can still redirect the trajectory is available. But it is not unlimited. It has never been unlimited. The window that matters is always the one you are standing inside of, right now, before the pattern escalates beyond the stage where recognition alone is sufficient, before another cycle of full stabilization convinces you to lower the frame again, before another round of pre-threshold interference stops the movement that your field has already identified as correct. You did not stumble into this transmission. Your field brought you here at the exact moment when what you have been sensing needed language. The detection system you were told to distrust has been working without error this entire time. It brought you here. It kept you watching. It already knew what your ordinary mind was still trying to rationalize. That is not a small thing. That is the field doing what it was built to do, navigating toward the frame that would allow the signal to finally be received as the accurate, meaningful, mappable data that it has always been. Say it aloud if you are ready. I do not dismiss the signs. That is not a small thing. That is the moment the instrument is reclaimed. Before you scroll, Leave one sign in the comments that this warning phase has already touched your life. It could be repeated pressure, strange coincidence, energetic heaviness, unexplained disruption, or the feeling that something is escalating beneath the surface. Name it clearly. If this transmission recognizes something you have been carrying in silence, share it with someone who keeps dismissing the signs around them. And if you are ready to recognize the warning before it escalates, subscribe to Arcturian Starseed Warning. You are not watching this by accident. You are recognizing a warning already in motion. And this is only the beginning.